checked it. Can you please make the appropriate person's co-host?
Yeah, sure.
Person's co-host. Achut, is everyone for today's panelists and everyone is ready?
I think Suyash sir has not joined yet.
Who?
Suyash sir.
Your voice is very feeble.
Hello.
Yeah, now it's audible.
Yeah, so Mr. Anil sir and Mr. Suyash sir not joined yet.
Sure, we'll get in touch with them. Give me a minute.
Yeah.
Achyut, can you please check if everybody is here, right?
Yeah, now everybody's here.
Um, Speakers will just wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll quickly start it off. Um, Susan, ma'am, should we start it or should we still wait for a
What
few more
about
minutes?
Vinay Rao?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Vanessa is.
Yeah, I think we can start.
Okay, so with interest in time, our attendees will be joining, keep joining. So in interest in time, I will take this thing ahead. So a very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us today. Today's panel discussion on disruptions by AI, either in Zoom as well as who are there with us on YouTube Live. Welcome. Today is day 6 of this 8-day-long National Summit on Artificial Intelligence, Disrupting the Disruptors. The summit till day 5 has got huge participation and we are counting on it more. It is my fortune to welcome such an enthusiastic bunch of audiences and our esteemed speaker for the day. Our panel will be hosting Dr. Ambika DR, Principal AI Manager, JICA's Infotech, Mr. Vinay Rao, Chief Engineering Manager at Cohesity, and an independent researcher in the field of AI, Mr. Suyaj Bhatt, UK-based entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Footbud.ai, Mr. Anil Bhattalahalli Srinath, applied statistics graduate student at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and a graduate student research assistant. Mr. Shashwat Panda, student representative pursuing his BTech in Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning from VITrendz. Without taking much time, we'll directly introduce our moderator for today's panel discussion. She has been in academia for past 30 years, imparting engineering education. She completed her BE in Computer Science from Bharat Engineering College, Chennai. She received her ME in Multimedia Technology and PhD in Computer Science from CEG campus, Anna University, Chennai. She was subsequently selected for a postdoctoral fellowship at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. She is currently Deputy Director, Center for Advanced Data Science, Vellore Institute of Technology, Chennai. She has been the principal investigator for 3 projects funded by DRDO, Government of India. She is passionate about building a digital platform for solving socially relevant problems using machine learning. He's also involved in several other collaborative projects and industries She's someone who does not require a very formal introduction, as she shares a huge fan following from her students and peers. Please allow me to welcome our moderator for today's panel discussion on disruptions by AI, Dr. Susan Elias. Ma'am, please take it forward.
Yeah, thank you, Saharsh, and a warm welcome to everybody who's gathered here, and particularly to all the panelists who are gathered here this evening. I'd like to thank this wonderful and awesome student team for bringing this whole event together and giving us all, particularly the panelists, to share our experiences. This is an initiative I see for the students, by the students, and we are very happy to be part of you and to encourage, motivate you, handhold you, and stand by you in this very brave endeavor that you are all embarking on as part of your career. On this note, I would like to just briefly introduce the context of the topic, introduce the speakers, and then we will have one round where all the speakers will give their opening remarks and a very unbiased view on what they think on this topic, and throwing light on their experiences from the domains that they represent and they've been working on. And then we'll move on to some interactive and interesting sessions. So we have a very enterprising panel here, and I'm sure you're going to take home wonderful, very impactful insights from this session. Sit back and enjoy the first half, and the second half, I'm sure it's all up to you, all the participants here, to make it interesting and lively for all of us. So if you look at disruptions of AI, now this is one topic that has been discussed over the past 40 years. So this is not the topic. In fact, I asked Saharsh why he chose this topic. So this was a topic which was actually brought up in the 1950s when we saw, not even, we saw a perceptron coming up in the form of an artificial intelligent model, and we thought, okay, this is disruption. And then it died down. And then we saw the second wave where we saw a single layered artificial neural network. Again, everybody got excited and we thought this is disruption. And then we saw the gradient descent algorithm coming in, and then the deep learning. And suddenly, in my personal view, we always stay updated with what are the latest milestones and breakthroughs that this field has brought out and what is its impact. And just before the pandemic, I remember reading about this milestone superhuman-like achievement, which was announced by DeepMind, where deep reinforcement learning models beat a 6-player poker game. And that was the latest update I had got myself to read about just before the pandemic. But what took all of us by shock and surprise is that none of these state-of-the-art models could predict the pandemic or even tell us anything about its onset. Even now we are clueless what will happen with the pandemic. Are we going for a third wave? Nothing, So we thought we had the state-of-the-art prediction algorithms, we had superhuman intelligence in place, but suddenly the whole world collapsed, because of lack of predictive models that were available to us, that we thought was, we have achieved it all. What we saw during the pandemic, however, was very interesting data analytics and visualization. All the data, lots of students came up, data on Kaggle, and presented very interesting insights and visualizations, country-wise, state-wise, about the wave, and that helped a lot of people to plan things, especially the government and everybody to plan. So it was only data analytics and visualization that really helped, helped us, supported us through the pandemic, I would say. And also, looking at the technology simultaneously with deep learning and the problem of catastrophic forgetting, and moving, where all the cutting edge research is moving towards lifelong learning, federated learning, it seems to be unstoppable, the world. So every time we think that, okay, we've disrupted enough, we feel we've not yet even begun to disrupt. So that's how this whole, if you analyze this whole course of AI over 40 years, and I still feel this topic is very relevant today, as it was 40 years ago. Only thing, its avatar has changed, the way it's disrupting and the kind of impact it has, and everything has changed. Today you find elderly people like in the 80s and all asking me, Google knew I wanted to buy this. Is this AI? And things like that, So there are, senior citizens are also understanding and trying to, use it. So I think this whole discussion will take us towards understanding how much of acceptance of AI has happened, in all the domains as such. Initially, I know that doctors were the ones who never accepted prediction algorithms. They felt, the kind of years of study went into becoming a doctor, and they can't have an algorithm predicting something, So it was, I noticed that doctors were the one who were least interested in this technology. But today, particularly radiologists and all are coming forward with COVID CT lung and data, giving it to us and asking, can you automate the scoring? Can you do this? Can you do that? So it's very nice to see that the acceptance of AI and the willingness of people from the respective domains to come forward and allow the disruption that we are all going to talk about today. So with this note, I'm happy to invite the panelists to share their views as well. And I'm sure we'll take it to a very interesting discussion. So let me begin by introducing Dr. Ambika. Ambika currently is the Principal AI Manager of Zycus Infotech. She is a researcher by profession with over 16 years of experience in computer vision with specialization in periocular biometrics. She has pioneered several cognitive-based solutions relating to content intelligence, computer-human interface, and EEG signal processing. She has published over 11 research papers in high-impact international journals, book chapters, and has also filed a patent. Her work also includes 3D modeling, 2D, 3D data processing, feature design on large data sets relating to RGB, IR, and depth cameras. May I invite you, Ambika, to share your opening remarks on this topic.
Hey, thanks, Susan. Thanks for that introduction. And thanks for opening the topic for us and set what is the expectation for this audience. Thanks for that. So in my perspective, the question is AI an enabler for disruption? I think that's a question that we want to answer today. So artificial intelligence, like you rightly mentioned, Susan, and every one of us know that artificial intelligence is one kind of a word which has been added to our English vocabulary. It doesn't actually belong to any engineering. It doesn't belong to a particular set of students. It actually has become a common topic. It's become a common word that everybody wants to begin to use. So they know that AI has some capabilities, right? So of course, artificial intelligence is a groundbreaking technology, but it's not magic, right? So it cannot do anything and everything. So it's left to us as a customer, as an end user on this AI solution as to how we perceive it. It can be a sustaining innovation, or it can turn out to become a disruptive innovation. So I would like to share one example which I have experienced myself. So I actually I'm currently working on a project on content intelligence, where we actually automate reading and analyzing and taking actionable insights for legal contracts. So legal contracts, right? It's got to be a contract between a customer and a counterparty. It could run from 2 pages to 1,000 pages document. And all these documents are actually developed by legal experts, right? And what has happened is COVID, right? The pandemic has brought in so many new rules and regulations and policies. So one example that I was giving even last time is famous market players such as Amazon, Swiggy, or any e-commerce based platforms, they have lots of contracts being signed with your customers, the vendors. And suddenly pandemic brought a large amount, or at least 20% of these businesses down. And now Amazon had to just say, okay, well, they wanted to say, Amazon, okay, we're going to stop sending products to you. And how does Amazon react? We are talking about how many lakhs of legal contracts, and where do you get legal advisors and unbiased legal advisors, right? So AI came, and AI was really helpful. So there are a large number of softwares such as Kira, and there are many more. There are many more softwares in the market which help them understand what is a force measure clause. So there's actually a force measure clause as to when you can terminate a particular clause. Have we agreed that they can forcibly, with or without cause, terminate a contract? This had been a very important step that huge market players had to take. And actually AI helped them, right? So, but yes, there is disruption in the sense, even today, if we have to send AI to the legal experts, we are selling a legal software to AI people, and they're like, what happens to my job? I don't want to buy it. And we go to when we go to huge organizations, huge vendors, and they obviously put your legal experts as the front office, right? And we have to convince the legal experts, and they're like, you're doing my job, and why do I want to do it? Why do I want to take away my job? Why do I want to bring down my own team? This is the way that we are actually taking. So what I would like to say is AI can be disruptive if you don't see this as a transformation of the business, right? So there's always been development in technology. We have to understand how the business is going to get transformed, be like a Roman in Rome. So start accepting AI for your business in a way it should be accepted, transform your business. And there is no way you say, no, I will not take in AI. It's disruptive. No, we have to live with it. So how educated are we to embrace AI solution is going to matter more. So we can't say no to AI. Definitely, it looks like it is closing doors for a lot of them, but we can reopen our doors just by understanding how it can transform our current business. So that's my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambika. I think you gave us a good example through the legal domain that none of us are really so familiar with. I'm not sure if many of us are familiar. We do have a law offered in our college, and I'm sure these students must be, beneficiaries of this AI. And I'm really not sure, if they are even aware of this. So, like what you're saying, people have to, even at college level, I think we have to introduce AI at a very, very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary level. Only then, because otherwise, like what you said, no, if you're going to revolt against the technology, you'll see it as a disruption. But if you accept and transform your business and align with this, and I'm sure you're going to really enjoy the transformation that it can enable. Thank you, Ambika, for your wonderful thoughts. May I now invite Vinay Rao. Vinay is a BE in telecommunications from BMS College of Engineering. He completed his master's in computer networking from North Carolina State University, and he has about over 11 years of industry experience. He's currently working at Cohesity as an engineering manager, and he's an independent researcher in the field of AI. He has very interesting research publications, all focused on the applications of AI. And I'm sure he's going to give us some very interesting insights into some of the publications that he will be talking about today. In his free time, he likes to read and travel, and I'm sure he has a lot of interesting knowledge and experience to share from all his experiences in the industry and his research. It's over to you, Vinay.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Susan. Thanks for the rather generous introduction. Yeah, as far as the topic is concerned, as far as disruption that the space of AI has brought into our consumer life or our enterprise life, I think I'm a strong believer that just as we had the internet disrupt the early 2000s, smartphones disrupt the early 2010s and onwards, I think AI is the entity which is going to make a huge impact, has been making an impact, and will make a huge impact going forward. Yeah, just as the example that you already quoted in various different sectors, like the healthcare industry is now accepting the capabilities that AI can bring to the table. while not necessarily eliminating the role of a doctor, but acting like an aid to a doctor. And that's something that is going to be the norm, in my strongest belief, that AI in its capabilities and its strengths is primarily going to be an aid to a lot of skill sets in various different industries. Just like Dr. Ambika mentioned, legal industry is one amongst many. Along similar lines, there's quite a few sectors, like I've just taken a few notes, right? There's quite a few sectors like the automobile industry, for example. The Teslas of the world have become so popular in the self-driving aspects because it's all image driven and there's images being processed. At the same time, you wonder why, or just as someone who's really interested in the aspects of how does it work, one of the questions that lingers, and there are answers to, is why isn't something like Tesla, which is automated driving, successful in a country like India? Just because of the number of variables. So there are aspects that AI may not completely disrupt / take away from humans, because the human element is integral to it. One of the things that I've also noticed, and I'm thankful for in the context of AI, is it has actually opened up doors for people like me who are specifically interested in independent research. Not all of us are actually actively in the space of academics, and not all of us are actively in the space of the few jobs which actually require delving into aspects of AI. In fact, that AI has allowed almost all of us to go and start writing simple code in Python. And I'm sorry, with all the simple APIs that have been made available, translate some of our ideas into practical outcomes. And that's one of the papers that I recently published, working with students out of RV College of Engineering. I'll just maybe speak a couple of lines about that piece of work specifically. The idea was very straightforward, and it came as a consequence of some of the transformer related work that's going around that time, 2019, 2018, I think, where they translated code written in one particular language into a completely different language, and they were able to generate outcomes which were similar. And that got me thinking that if you could actually do something like that, why can't I take spoken Kannada and translate that into code? Right now, this is just an idea and basis. What if we do this with that? But simply because I have access to a Google Colab, I have access to Python, I was actually able to work with students and see that yes, spoken language can actually be translated into executable Python code. So overall, just to summarize, I think what I'm trying to get to is AI has become a massive disruptor in enterprise space as well as in various other verticals. But at the same time, I strongly believe that this disruption is not in the context of taking jobs away. It's more in the context of being an aid to as many different industry-centric folks as possible. And the second thing I think AI is going to do as a consequence is make computer science an aspect that's inherent to not just engineering, but it's going to become a common factor across all industries. So a CA might actually need to understand some aspects of Python and write simple code to generate these APIs. So yeah, I think overall AI is awesome, but it comes with a pinch of salt.
Thank you, Vinay. I think AI-enabled innovations is something that can be really targeted towards solving problems that we don't really feel that they're disruptive, but more enablers to make life easy for us and things like that. I think that insight was very interesting that you brought in. We'll take it up again for our discussion in the next round. Thank you, Vinay. We'll now move on to Mr. Suash Bhatt. Suash has over 8 years of experience across software, agri-tech, and food manufacturing industries. He finished his undergraduation from BMS College of Engineering and did his post-graduation from the Cambridge University in the UK, and he's currently based in Cambridge. He is the founder and CEO of foodbud.ai, a Cambridge-based food tech company which creates AI-powered food recommendation platforms. I'm sure Suhas is here as a role model to these, the Checked It team, as a startup team. They look up to role models like you, Suhas, and I'm sure you have a lot of food for thought for us today.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Susan, and thanks for inviting me for this panel discussion. And yeah, I think I don't know if that's a role model, but I have been trying my best to get involved in this tech industry. So 9 years back, when I started working for this software company in Bangalore, there was a lot of buzz around data analytics and machine learning and AI. And even at that time, as you mentioned before that, these technologies have been around for the last 40, 50 years. But then I think that, around 2012 or 2010, there was a lot of buzz in different industries. And even in the company where I was working, we were told to do a lot of data analytics stuff. So it was more of a buzzword. But fast forward now, I just recently saw that, engineering colleges like BMSCE and other RVC, I think they have dedicated machine learning and AI branches. I was I was so glad to see that that's the kind of transformation that has happened. And what I've realized is that in the last decade or so, people as well as companies have educated themselves around this, AI and machine learning technologies, and have transformed their processes and products to be to take it to more of in the mainstream businesses. And I think that's phenomenal. And here in Cambridge, so I've been in Cambridge for the last 2.5 years, and I started this company called Foodbud, which is into AI powered machine learning based food recommendation. But at the same time, I'm also a part of some accelerators and incubators here. And every day, there is every second startup that I come across uses AI. We were talking about a lot of applications. I think one of you, Dr. Ambika, mentioned about using AI in legal contracts. In every field. Just last week, I took part in an experimental, I was invited by a founder of one of the medtech startups, which is using AI to predict heart rate, respiratory rate, and all these vital parameters using a selfie. And I was surprised that, they just asked me to click a selfie on their phone. And then within 30 seconds, they gave me the reading of all these parameters, which was 96% accurate with all the hardware, sensors that we are using. So these are the types of technologies that people are working here. And every startup that I come across has some or the other application of AI in their respective fields. For example, in the healthcare, I just mentioned about this, this medical startup, which is trying to help doctors. And there are startups which focus towards curing cancer or, curing Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all these things using a lot of data sets. So all these startups have access to big amount of data sets, and they're using it to train their machine learning, models to provide, some sort of help to in form of either cure or, a vaccination or all these things. In terms of journalism, there is a startup who is in the same incubator in which I am. What they do is they work on a dynamic software which can predict the biasness in dynamic articles in the real time. So that's one another application. In terms of manufacturing, I was working with a startup around a year ago in terms of their market analysis. So what they do is they manufacture batteries, fast charging batteries. And to develop these fast charging batteries, there are millions of combinations of cathodes and anodes that have to, that have to be analyzed. And their AI powered solution does that within 30 minutes. So these solutions are now being sold to companies like Toshiba or ABB, which are coming up with all these unique. So just yesterday, I think I saw a news that ABB has come up with a super fast charging battery, which can charge a car in 15 minutes. And moving on, the startup with which I was working on, they are probably working to to get this done in 6 minutes. So 10 years from now, all these manufacturing technologies will be out there for consumers. But we also need to understand that all these innovations are happening around AI, and everything that we do, everything that we are interested in, that can be tied to some elements of these of machine learning or AI. I used to work for a semiconductor company called Tektronix, and we had I was interested in all these semiconductor chip making companies like Intel and these kind of companies. So I also recently got to know that Intel is using a predictive algorithm to segregate their sales channels, and they predict that using that algorithm they can increase the revenue by $20 million within a year. So just imagine that in every industry, and it's not just the product that are meant for consumers, it is the processes as well. Like every industry has human resource process, the sales process, the marketing, all these processes are also there's a lot of scope of applying AI to these processes, and a lot of industries are educating themselves on these concepts. And I think students who are learning these technologies, they have a very good opportunity to to get good exposure to learn about these technologies, so that they can apply not only in the in the context of the company that they work for, but also in the context of their hobbies or their passion. Someone might be passionate about singing, so how can you apply that technology to help someone else? So there's a startup here which is working on teaching people how to sing. So based on their vocal cords, you just record your voice, and based on that, you will be advised what are the next steps you could do. So anything that you are passionate about, not just the software development or something, but like anything you're passionate about that has an element of applying these technologies to it. And I think that is the biggest learning for the students. Like you don't need to necessarily study hard to get grades, but you can also look for opportunities to apply these things in the things that you're passionate about.
Thank you, Suyash. I think you conveyed a very interesting point that students must take their passion and profession forward. They really don't have to go around looking for a domain in which they can apply AI. They can look within themselves and pick up something that they're very passionate about, a hobby or a talent or something like that, and bring in AI and really bring it out into some kind of enabling technology. From the insights you gave, from your experiences that you shared, that of late, all the startups that you saw had AI. That's something that we've been seeing. AI seems to be the foundation stone of every startup that we see today. So what was actually disrupting here, as I see, is that super dream companies used to actually take a lot of our bright minds. But today, students are stepping away from that, landing up in a super dream kind of a dream, and breaking away from tradition and taking very brave strides to start these kind of startups. And I think AI has done disruption in that. But than that, I don't think it's going to be more an enabler than really changing the career path for our young generation going forward. I think our next, thank you, Suhas. We'll come back to you with more discussions. I think our next speaker will be Anil Srinath, and Anil will add probably some insights on music coming together with AI. I saw in your profile that you were musically inclined. And let me just briefly introduce Anil to you. We're now moving to the more younger section of our panelists. Maybe we're just coming down one generation, and the next two speakers are students. We have Anil next, who's a student of applied statistics, graduate student from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, US, and he's currently the graduate student research assistant at the Data Science for Dynamic Intervention Decision Making Laboratory. Wow, I've never heard of anything like this. I'm really interested in knowing more about this. He does a little bit of a lot of things, actually. He does Python, machine learning, ANN, statistics, R, Julia, Linux, system administration, and so on. And he also likes building electronic circuits, robots, embedded systems, and projects to automate absolutely useless things. He has started multiple startups right from his high school times in robotics, industrial automation, IoT, and so on. He enjoys music and he loves composing music and is also learning music production. And I'm not sure if he's really thought of integrating his passion and profession. Let's hear from him. So over to you, Anil.
Thanks a lot, Suzanne, for the warm introduction, and thanks a lot for having me here. And to answer your question, yes, I have actually thought of it, and I have actually built a sequence model to take the MIDI notations and just to see if it generates something. It did a good job, but I didn't actually do a full solution to that. So coming to the topic, so we all know that AI for sure is disruptive, but as a person who comes from more of a statistics and a mathematical background, I'm more interested in investigating why there is such a disruption, or why can we say that there is such a disruption. So I think it can be nailed down to two different points. The first one is that AI can do a better job than humans when it comes to a particular task, right? So brain is basically like a giant neural network, which is constantly learning, constantly avoiding overfitting. And, it has its own reinforcement model with the, reward and punishment system, and it has limited computation. And its whole optimization strategy is to maximize happiness, right? So that's what our brain does, but a neural network can be optimized for a particular task. So that's one of the points. And the second one is that AI can create simpler models, which are not so bad, but they just work, right? So imagine the mathematics of, very large systems, okay? Or even imagine like a very small system where there is a liquid falling from the top of a building. And if you are trying to predict by what force it hits the ground, right? So if you are going mathematically without AI or without, statistical computation, there is gravity, there is air drag, there is surface tension, and as the area changes, the surface tension changes. So a whole lot of things, and mathematically to model this would be a nightmare, right? So AI can create a model which is not probably mathematically accurate, but it is good enough for practical consideration. So I would like to quote George Box, who is a very famous British statistician, who says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So mathematically, when we are constructing a model, it doesn't really mean that it has any implications, but it does work in the practical considerations. And in industry, for a technology to be disruptive, it should not just be theoretical, but it also has to be applicable. So one of the things, or one of the research that I was involved with a doctor, was fragment-based drug discovery. So when there is a disease, we would want a particular compound to actually help with that disease. It could be something that, for example, paracetamol, which is used for, headaches. So there'll be an active compound which can be used for a disease. Let's say there is another pandemic. I hope not, but if there is another pandemic, and if we have another virus, and if we know for sure that there is a particular subcompound which can actually, bind to that virus and destroy it, then the pharmaceutical industries, they would have to try out 5,000, 10,000 different other molecules which are stable, which also contains that particular, subgroup. One of the disruptions in AI is fragment-based drug discovery in healthcare, where we just take a small compound. We would have trained the AI through all stable compounds. So if we start with a very small compound, it can actually grow the rest of the compound and to make it stable, right? So this actually saves a lot of time. This actually saves a lot of effort from pharmaceutical industries. And I think that, innovations in this directions have been very helpful, and innovations in this directions are quite promising when it comes to healthcare. Also, in addition to this, I have worked on, as Suzanne said, doctors were not really open when it comes to innovations, when it comes to AI, because they would have done a lot of research and study before that, and they don't just trust a system which was trained on a few data sets. One of the examples that I have worked on was with NIMHANS to diagnose epilepsy from EEG. So to get epilepsy from EEG, you would have to look for minute patterns, and you actually need not just specialization, but you also need super specialization in epilepsy. But a lot of doctors don't have it in villages. It's not very accessible. So we just built one from Raspberry Pi where we actually trained a lot of such features with sequence model, and it was able to actually diagnose, given an EEG, whether that person suffers from epilepsy or not. So I mean, there is no doubt that AI is really disruptive, and also that it can be applied a lot to healthcare. And I am just excited to see what the future presents for us.
Thank you, Anil. I think like what you said, exploring, trying to identify, why AI is disrupting is as important as understanding if it is disrupting. And like what you said, understanding the math behind it or the physics and all this probably leads to greater acceptance, which I don't think it's easy to sit down and teach doctors optimization, convex optimization and all that. There's a different approach we have to take in certain domains. But today I see a lot of people interested in, they want to learn, reverse engineer the mathematics that they did and just learn, go back and just revise what is needed for AI. So I think like what you said, if you understand the need for the disruption, it will be more accepted, easily accepted. Thank you, Anil. We'll come back to you. We now have the youngest of our panelists here, Shashwat Panda, and I'm very happy to introduce Shashwat, as he's a very young and intelligent, bright and brilliant student of our campus. He's doing a BTech in Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning, and his topics of interest include deep learning, computer vision, neural networks, GANs, and natural language processing. He has worked on projects which deal with real-time data in the form of object detection, video analysis, sentiment analysis, and also regularly contributes to open source projects like PyTorch. He's also an avid lover of art, music, philosophy, poetry, plays the piano and also paints during his free time. I'm very happy to introduce Shashwat here, and he represents a community of students on our VIT campus who from the day one when our juniors joined the campus, I can see a lot of first years here from their register number here. They motivate them, and they look up to all these senior students, and they very responsibly take them through a very interesting track over the 4 years. While we keep very seriously taking classes, they have a lot of fun with these seniors outside the classes, and I think Shashwat is also responsible for one such activity where they attract and very responsibly take students towards a very interesting learning path, and they kind of make sure the students are industry ready, and they contribute a lot towards this on our university campus. It's over to you, Shashwat.
Yes, hello. Hi, everyone and the panelists. And thank you, Susan ma'am, for such a lovely introduction. So I want to start off by saying that, all the panelists we've had here, everyone is so experienced, right? They have a lot of industrial as well as academic experience. So they have a lot of insight into how the disruptions go in AI in today's world, right? But I am not that experienced. I'm a student, and as a student, it's my main job is to learn about these new things and maybe do some research here and there. So in my own life and like studying about things, I found a lot of things in AI in particular that have caused disruptions. So I got a few talking points here. So, okay, first one in, let's say, healthcare system, right? So I think yesterday, one of my friends, Pratik Garai, he gave a speech about his hands-on experience with AI in the healthcare industry, right? So he made a convolutional neural network to predict the chances of a victim of a person having pneumonia, by analyzing the images of their x-rays, any patient's x-rays. If you analyze them well with a CNN, there would be some kind of a prediction that would tell you that if that person is going to have some kind of a breathing illness. And as many of the panelists were saying, right, conventionally doctors did not used to trust computers and algorithms, simple algorithms, to interfere with their business, you know. Like, obviously, how can you trust something that is just a computer and there's no thinking on its own? But in these last 5-6 months, I've had a lot of exposure to doctors themselves, in fact, who are now starting to rely upon these advanced new technologies. So a few months back, I did an internship with a neurorehabilitation company called Manastic, which focused on physiotherapy of patients who are suffering from mental illnesses, like, let's say, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, right? So these patients are not in the best of their conditions. They're usually old, and when your mind gets broken, right, there's not a lot of much you can do, and you have to rely on others for help. So they have to do physiotherapy exercises at home, and their family members have to take care of them. Now, in this era of the pandemic, right, a lot of people can't go out, and already old people are not very able to do that. So this project I worked on was called Neuro Rehab, and it helped these old people do their neurological physiotherapy exercises from home. So, and these are all guided by the doctors in real time. So, for example, if suppose I'm a patient, there would be some kind of caretaker or some family member, and if you just use your application to, you know, capture them on video, the app itself would be able to detect what the person's doing, how he's doing it, what all the technical details, and all that data is fed through a machine learning algorithm, which basically tracks and monitors all your progress on that exercise or whatever, and it generates a model for how good you'll be by the end of the month, what speed with what speed you should be doing the exercises. For example, if you make a video, for example, if the doctor tells you to do an exercise of stretching your arms, right, so you'll probably go like this and this. So what the computer vision algorithms that we developed did was, suppose it's a pose detection algorithm with computer vision. So if you raise your hand, there's a angle between your shoulders and your wrists and your elbows, right? So each angle of each of your joints gets calculated whenever it's captured from the camera. And if you actually move your hand, the angles also change, right? So these angles are used as thresholds and parameters to determine what kind of movement you're doing in real time. And that information is directly relayed to your doctors. So I think that's a very, very interesting thing to have been doing, right? Another field that I've recently been reading on is generative adversarial networks, or GANs, right? So there are a lot of disruptions in that field. It's actually a fairly new technology, right? It got invented in 2013 or 2014. So instead of telling you how it is disrupting everything, I'd like to show you for a brief moment, if that's okay. Okay, I'll just share my screen here. Yeah, if you can see here, I have got a pre-trained model for GANs. But before that, I'd like to show you some tweets. So if you can see in this GIF, this left-hand side of the pane is actually the software where you draw anything, like, you know, all the drawings we did in nursery and all. If you just draw the lines, the GAN would be able to replicate images that are real, which are derived from this line painting. And it's amazing what we can do. You know, so one of the panelists actually mentioned an application where you could like speak what you want to do, what a code to do, and a Python code will be formed from that, you know, with the natural language processing. And so this is like kind of similar to that, but you know, even if you are not that good at it, you can experiment with things. You can also visualize the effects of climate change or whatever's happening. There's one more thing. Ian Goodfellow, the inventor of GANs. So this is what human pictures made from GANs look like in 2014. Like, it looks nightmarish and like in black and white, but this is in 2018, where it looks almost photorealistic. So now I'd like to show you something like in 2021, how this technology has evolved. If you see this thing, this is pictured by a GAN. This person is not real at all. This person does not exist. This is merely something that is made with a GAN. And if I just like keep refreshing this, I'll just keep on getting faces of people who were never there at all. And these all look photorealistic, like they're captured with professional cameras. And I can do this forever and ever and ever. All pictures are made with GANs. So there are 2-3 more things. This video of a horse, this is a real-time feed, and using a GAN, you can convert it, you can like add patterns to it, and it actually makes it a zebra. Yeah, and wait, yeah. Oh, sorry. I got 1-2 things more to show. Yes, and this one, the facial recognition thing, you can use it on GANs, and using the data sets of expressions of real people, you can automate living images like the Mona Lisa in this one. You can make anything do anything. This one thing where it actually manages to capture the eye position of Mona Lisa, right? The thing where it keeps looking at you no matter where you are in the frame. If this one tries to replicate it, then there's one more thing. So these are all the different applications of GAN, which I have really thought these are like really groundbreaking. Like Adobe, for instance, you might have heard that it's developing new AI algorithms to figure out if an image, whatever image it is, it has been edited in Photoshop or not. Because obviously, if you warp any image around, then the pixels will be stretched or they will be blemished, right? The AI they're developing can actually figure that out if you've messed with the image or if it's photoshopped or something. Then Google is using all sorts of GANs and image processing to mostly for textual analysis and image analysis. All the captchas you see in Google images, they're actually derived from the real images in the world, from Google Maps, right? Real images, and they make it into captchas using GANs. So they're real. They're derived from real things, but they're not actually real. You can't take it. Then IBM uses GANs for like data augmentation, which is you have a limited data set, but you're using GANs to make more data from that little data set because you don't have enough data. And then Disney is using GANs as well for super sampling. Suppose you have a 1080p video. It uses that for super sampling and making it into some, let's say, 4K video. And even in gaming, NVIDIA is doing a lot of work with super sampling and AI. It's called DLSS, I think. Deep Learning Super Sampling is the name of the process. And if you have a really bad or old laptop or computer and you're trying to play games in it, suppose you're getting like 60 FPS or 30 FPS at 1080p resolution. What it does is it uses AI. It does not actually calculate the pixels, but it zooms in into the pixels and creates more duplicate pixels to resemble what it would be if it was computed in real time. And then it uses to upscale it from like 1080p to 4K or even from 480p to 10K. So it can like increase the efficiency and performance a lot. So these are all the things that have been disrupting in my own life as a student and a gamer or a programmer. So yeah.
That was wonderful, Shashwat. I think, like I always say, it is my students who are the best teachers I have seen. Give them 10 minutes and they'll put a PowerPoint presentation and take you through fantastic, illustrations of what they understand. Sometimes I ask these students, is it our boring lectures which really inspired you to become such great teachers? Or, what is it, from where did you guys learn to teach so well? So that was fantastic in whatever little time you really took us through. I think all the young students here would have been very excited to know about some of the current technologies, which we thought was a future, which we thought was, something that we saw in the movies, and you just showed us that it's all here already. So, coming out with cutting edge technology is one thing. Using the existing technology is one thing. Okay, so some of us are in, developing new technology, while we really need to also introduce these, like how Shashwat did just now, talk to people about these technologies, because they will find innovative ways to use it as well, like how you said, no, fraud detection and all these kind of things. So that is also good enough if you're able to take an existing technology, at least first years and all that, no, just use it in a way that it is never used before. Okay, so that is also some kind of insights that you're giving out to the world. Now, when you spoke about, I think two speakers so far spoke about voice and how you can really use voice. I see India as a huge market for voice-based products, because we're going to see, the next generation, next era, we're going to see in voice-enabled things. I know Alexa can now understand Hindi, but Hindi doesn't solve India's problem, no? Looking at all the languages and dialects, and I think we have 22,000, if you look, include the dialects and everything, 22,000 variants of accents and dialects, languages, and so on. So India is like a huge market to analyze voice, basically accent and language, making all these, bringing out filters to make it accent, neutral accents, and also language translation and so on. So this is something where a lot of, I don't think people will feel it disruptive at all. So like what the speaker said, choosing where it will make life easier and acceptance easier is where we should actually invade. But there are certain places where, AI will perform better than humans, like what Anand said, so those are the places where, it's very easy to integrate AI. So identifying where AI will do the, the best performance and least disruption with regard to what people think is disruption to jobs and things like that. Whenever there is a kind of a trade-off with, the kind of benefits, and so it has to be very tactfully integrated. For example, during the pandemic, okay, like you were talking about, I think Shashwat explained about this telemedical thing. Telemedicine is something available for the past 30 years, but doctors never cared about it. They thought telemedicine was only from the high-tech cities to extend it to the rural India, so this was never being used. But today we saw even a doctor across the street was only treating you through telemedicine. So everybody suddenly was looking for platforms to connect with their patients, and what Shashwat said was a good example of how people connected with their patients. And I, even during the pandemic, I think there was one session where I was a speaker, and I was asked to explain to doctors what is data, because the doctors think that as soon as you come to the hospital, you fill a form, that is data. So I had a workshop for doctors telling them a cough is data. Silence between coughs is data. Everything is data. Okay, so they were like, oh, they didn't know that. Okay, they didn't know that this is all data. So that is something that we should start, I think, somewhere, very, very below the entire vertical of this whole AI, and really not talk about prediction and this and that, and, start with how you also introduce it into your domain, how you sell this technology is also very, very important, because what the doctors needed during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people in the ICUs, and there was shortage of doctors and everything. What doctors needed was not prediction models, whether this patient will get black fungus or whether this patient will need oxygen. They didn't need that. What they were asking is, can you give us just-in-time surveillance systems? That is, you just do a surveillance of who's going to get critical. Just give us 10 minutes time to do something on the patient. So just, they wanted a kind of a just-in-time, intervention system, just-in-time note. They want to make the decision. They don't want an algorithm to make the decision. They were okay with allowing us to recommend, probably this patient, have a look at him. So that much they allowed, AI to come into the field, because they were overwhelmed. I think this pandemic is also. So there's a lot of space in healthcare. There's a lot of space in voice-enabled technologies and so on. Now, going through all the panelists once again in the second round, I'd like to have a unified theme. You can go back to whatever you conveyed to your respective themes. And I like the second discussion to focus on the fact, or to just throw light on, currently looking at the way AI has been enabled in all your respective domains. Is AI being used responsibly? should AI be used responsibly? And what are the measures we should take to make sure that AI is used responsibly? So can we have Dr. Ambika talking about responsible AI?
I think that's a very important and very, I think, need of the hour question that has to be answered, Susan, because the enthusiasm, at least we see in this audience itself, is going to tell us that, there are going to be a lot more innovative ideas that's going to come up probably in next 2 or 3 years, right? So that's a very important question. So I always think that there should be a trust. Trust is said to be the key factor for any sustainable solution. So like, I've also discussed in the past that just because AI can address any problem, or probably any problem can be thought to be solved in terms of AI, we should not let AI solve every problem, right? So there are 3 important things that one should actually question before taking up an AI solution, right? So first thing, what I would like to say is, as an AI engineer or anybody who's using AI or who's marketing AI should make an oath that he is going to aim to enable AI to any business only by educating them as to how this can be used and how it can solve problems, right? So there are so many ways that innovations have come in. Now, the very good example, Susan, that you said, Google and the voice assistant systems, right? And what is happening, where are we leading to, is a very big question, right? Now, it's very easy for anybody. Gone are the days when, you really think on something and then come out with answers. Now it's not like that. So I still remember I would do multiplication very well, division very well. Calculators came in and got spoiled. And I still remember my parents telling me, stop using calculator, only then your minds get sharp. And now I'll have to tell my daughter, stop using Alexa, only then you will get better. So she just says, hey, Alexa, what's the meaning of invasive? And she has it. She doesn't know how to look through a dictionary. It's always your phone or your Alexa, right? This is the way it is going. So it is very important that you solve a problem which is going to be value addition, right? That should help your life get better. And it should not be putting you down. So we've started using technology so closely, and we are moving away to the reality of life. So we spend 15 hours, all of us know, we spend 15 hours on screen and then push or pull ourselves out for 1 hour gym, right? That's become our tradition for today, losing health with all the automated systems around. So one important responsibility is we need to educate the business as to when they have to embrace AI and how it can solve your solution. That's the first point. Second point, when we are doing AI, right, we have to first know from where to start. So AI is not born today, right? And there are millions of people putting hands on AI contemporarily. Parallel research is happening at all phases. And what actually happens is we start with a basic algorithm. We start looking at 10 different models, start training 10 different models, and then come out with a solution, say, oh, this model is doing this. Right? And then we forget about the unseen scenarios, unattended scenarios, unaddressed scenarios. So very important thing is we have to work on a literature survey, understand how this problem was perceived earlier, what were the actions that had already been taken, and start with the 11th step and not the first step again. Right? There are already 10 steps that somebody has climbed up. Let's spend some time to investigate what was the literature survey that was done and start with the 11th step and then take the solution forward. And the third important point that I would like to say is build a prototype very fast, right? So don't start doing an innovation and working on the innovation for a year or 2 years, only to come back to say that the customer is not experiencing there is a wrong experience for the customer. He didn't even expect that this is the experience that he's going to be doing. If we have to sustain an AI solution, there should be a very fast prototype happening, deliver it to the customer, get the feedback, and then start adjusting your features to meet the expectation of the customer, rather than working years together for a wrong experience that a customer would not be expecting. I think these three are very important mantras. And as a business, when somebody is accepting this, I think it should be very important to understand, although we have huge models built today, they will again fall down tomorrow. Like Shashwat was saying, there's GAN coming up. Tomorrow there's going to be another algorithm coming up. Will I scrape off my business again and again and again and again? So we'll have to look for scaling up. We'll have to look for generalization. And as a business, I should be open to again transform my AI-based solution to a new AI-based solution. So disrupt your own business before somebody else disrupts your business. Otherwise, disrupt. If you don't disrupt, then you'll perish. So this is what I also believe in.
Thank you, Ambika. I think there was a lot of advice for this, the startup community and all the students gathered here who are looking for advice on, warnings rather, if they are going to embark on an entrepreneurial journey. What I wanted also a focus during the second round is when I meant responsible AI is also on the data privacy part of it. Like last night, I was just thinking, I was sure I didn't speak loud, that I must order tender coconut online. And when I woke up, the first ad I saw was, from where I could buy tender coconut. I was sure I didn't even whisper it to anybody. So that's the kind of, lack of privacy that we have. So is this irresponsible use of data? Okay. Is this the way to go? Or should in India, for example, follow the kind of regulations Europe, US, and China has? Or do we just allow everybody to, invade into anybody's data and make billions out of our data? So, or should we have more regulations on the data? Vinay, can you throw some light on?
Absolutely. Should we have more regulations? Absolutely. Should we replicate aspects that countries like Europe have now started ramping up in the context of data privacy? Absolutely. Is this the right time for it? Maybe. Because, for no specific reason, but the Western world, which includes Europe and the Americas of the world, are slightly ahead in their acceptance of AI by themselves. We are in our early stages in the context of transitioning from academic exercises to production grade systems. We're currently heavily invested in academic exercises, and we're now accepting the reality of what it takes and actually put into productions. And the notions of responsibility and ethics definitely kick in when you're talking production grade systems, because there is a rupee value or a dollar value associated with the technology that you're selling. And as we know, the notion of AI at the end of the day is to use information that you have to generate information that you don't have. People call it predictions, sure, but prediction is also coming from some source of knowledge, which is information that we currently have access to, which in terms of AI is data sets. So if I were to simply take an example of image-based data sets, if someone was to simply use this Zoom session, take screenshots of each of our images, and then use that to train, who's wearing what, I wouldn't be comfortable with that person doing that. So should there be, if the question was as binary as should there be oversight from any higher authority or a body that can define these rules and regulations, if it's a binary question, I absolutely think there should be. But at the same time, in order to drive innovation, in order to provide that platform for people to go ahead and start building systems which requires data sets, we may not necessarily want to kick those regulations and rules into the system right away, right? One of the additional aspects that I noted down when Dr. Ambika was talking, and I completely agree with every single aspect that she mentioned, because explainability is a huge aspect of everything data science right now. And as someone personally who, I'm sure most people here would have gone to Kaggle, found some data set, done some notion of classification. Is the person wearing a mask or not? Right now, there is a data set available. People used it. They said, I have 96% accuracy in detecting whether or not a person's wearing a mask. Great. Now, is this a solution that you could directly go and sell to a customer? At which point now there are notions of copyrights. So you owe Kaggle something, because if you're going to earn money out of this, Kaggle has to get a cut out of it. Are there regulations in place for detecting whether or not a particular image used in a particular classification system was used from a particular source? No. And if I may venture into unknowns, that in itself is a great startup idea of how can you enforce rules and regulations and mechanisms to ascertain ethical and responsible usage of AI. So, and the last point that I also want to call out is, as much as we would love for rules and regulations entities to kick in and tell us what to do and what not to do, we have to rely on our individual conscience as well, and rely on peer feedback. Just like while publishing an academic paper, you have to get peer feedback before you can push it out into the world. Any system that's transitioning out of POC into production grade system should be peer reviewed, and that is where all of our computer science design concepts kick in, where we need to be sure that we explore all ramifications of what we are pushing out into the system. Deepfakes, for example, was a huge problem, right? And GANs, for example, was a facilitator of something as fun as these people do not exist.com, but at the same time, it was also responsible for a very dark aspect of it, our internet right now. So responsibility cannot simply be a governing body's job. It has to be individual driven as well.
Thank you, Vinay. I think
Sure.
what Ambika and Vinay, both of them conveyed, one, Ambika said, you have to educate the people. Vinay said, it has to come from within. But above all that, in this big bad world, let's move on to Suash and tell us, so Suash can tell us how these regulations that were brought into in Europe, did it have an impact, and how was it like, how did it hamper progress? Like, can you probably throw your light on why you think Vinay said we need regulations, but maybe this is not the right time? Can you share your views on that?
I think I completely agree with Vinay and even Dr. Ambika, what she said earlier about the need of having strict regulations. But before that, I also wanted to say that there is a fine line between moving fast and moving right. So students or people who are trying to develop technologies, they need to ensure that whatever they are doing is in the right path. Like it's not something that they're just doing which is probably going to affect someone in a bad way. So this is a very conscious decision that an individual has to take. And for example, like companies like Amazon and Google, they move very fast in putting these technologies like Alexa, Siri and all. But later, like last year, we realized that there's a gender bias problem in all these voice assistants, right? Because of the default voice being women, there was a research conducted, and then people realized that children have started seeing their mothers and their female members in their families as someone who is an assistant, and they take orders. So this is something that is inherently wrong in any technology that we implement, and we have to be very conscious when we use these powerful technologies to develop solutions. So I say that more like privacy definitely is a fundamental aspect, but we also need to be careful about having diversity and sensitivity when we implement solution. So for that, we need to educate ourselves. What are we building this solution for? Who is going to get impacted? Is there anything else that we can implement? We might want to take more time, but we want to do it right the first time we do. So a lot of companies, they have, in this rat race, like, they have implemented technologies, but then later, 10 years down the line, they realize that, these technologies have created a negative impact in the society. That should not be the case. Secondly, about the privacy, I would say that, definitely Europe or, the UK, I realized that, this place has a lot of good regulations in place. So even before I started the company, I was required to abide by all the GDPR norms. The company has to, read through, everyone needs to educate themselves with the regulations in place and what are the impact of it. For example, if you use the GANs to develop something that is unethical, what is the impact to you? How can you be taken into, into the court, or how can you be even jailed? So all these impact, you need to go through that. You need to educate yourself what is the impact of the solutions, and then I think it's very sensitive, and you need to read through all the rules and regulations. So here in the UK, the GDPR rule says that, if you're taking any information from users, it should be anonymized. It means that, you need to provide a mechanism to the users, so that, you do not have their data and their names associated with it. So there are a lot of companies which are working to provide these solutions to anonymize the data. So these are some of the mechanism. And if you are working on a technology, you also need to work on these technologies to, to kind of, make sure that you do not do anything wrong. So that's how you will, you will end up developing a sustainable product or solution. I think it's very important to include these privacy and, these aspects of diversity and sensitivity in your solutions.
Yeah, like what you said, integrating this in your solution is important. But even when I mentioned, like, this whole space of verifying if it is there itself gives a lot of ideas for startups itself. So once the regulations are in place, then you can really automate the system of verifying, because we can't trust anybody on verifying.
I slightly disagree with that point, that, in the stage of verification or research, you can use data that you easily get. So even companies here, when they do extensive research, all these medtech startups or these, these innovative technologies, they have processes in place how to utilize that research data. If you're getting a research data, it has to comply by all the rules and regulations. At every, if you say that, for research, we can just do research on some data that doesn't comply with regulations, but later on, once we develop the prototype, we will implement these regulations. That cannot happen, because at that time you will be forced to, pilot your product, and you will be in a hurry, because, you would have developed something beautiful, and you would want to, show the world that, this is what I've developed. So it's very difficult for you as an individual and as a company to, to find the right time when to implement that. So it's always better to implement these regulations, strict regulations, even at the start of it. So you can always make sure that the data that you get is of a right format, and, there are norms in place where I don't know how it is, how the database, how do we get data sets, but definitely here there are norms where you can get, reliable data set, and you can, always abide by these anonymized protocols to, to follow that.
Yeah, in fact, tomorrow I'm giving a talk on federated learning. So that is a concept where the data doesn't move out of your device, only the knowledge moves out. So all the training and everything is done locally. So that's the kind of a revolutionary change we're going to see, that you don't share data, you only share the knowledge and information. So,
yeah, and then I think that you need to show that, to the Western nation as well, that your data or your technology, your research can be trusted, because the things that you have used, or, that we have used in terms of developing that product, is of high quality and high standards. So only then we can also, we can say that, we are at par with these technologies. So I think that is what differentiates us in terms of doing the R&D with, with that kind of mindset.
So the ethics must start at the prototype level itself.
Yes, definitely.
So anonymizing the data is something that people did, but there's something called this linkage attacks. And I think 87% of Americans can be identified with just gender, date of birth, zip code. because it's
Yeah.
7. That's the kind. I think there was some case study done on some Netflix review, and then all the people were identified, though the data put up by Netflix was anonymous. So that's why now people are moving towards federated learning, where nobody shares data. You cannot take anybody's data out, and already the application of Google Gboard is federated on. Like whatever you type, the words don't leave your mobile. Only the knowledge and recommendations as to which should be the next word, only that knowledge is going out to a global model. So that's a new trend that will probably put privacy in place, but of course not completely. It's not foolproof. Again, there are lots of attacks even there, So you really can't trust the server, you can't trust the clients, you can't trust anybody these days. So you really need a foolproof system in place. Thank you for those insights. We'll move on to Anil now. Anil, since you work on technology for a social cause and work on very dynamic intervention systems, how much can you rely on AI, and how important is this for those AI solutions to be very accurate and responsible, or if that is the right word to use, because you're dealing with mental health and things like that, and it's between you and the algorithm, the decision making, right? So how important are all these in those kind of applications?
That's a very good point, because currently the research that I'm working on is basically let's say that there is a person who has been addicted to alcohol or cigarettes, right? So if that person is taking a walk in the evening, the GPS sensors and basically the alarms and everything, so it's integrated with the phone, it would see if there is an alcohol shop nearby. So if they're taking a route through that alcohol shop, it will say, hey, why don't you just take another route where you can actually go through this, so that you don't get tempted or you don't relapse, because that's the number one problem that alcohol and drug addicts have when they're trying to get out of it. So even in these situations, we use AI or statistical learning. I think that they're one and the same, but if it's AI, we use it in a way that it aids people rather than to take over people. So when it comes to, and also I have had my fair share of research experience with diagnosis of epilepsy. So in such situations, you would want false positive rates, at least on the screening test, to be very high, because nowadays people just download any data set and claim that they have come up with a solution, but you would also have to understand how sensitive the test is or how specific the test is. First level of screening can actually contain a lot of false positives. It's okay for a cancer patient to come in and actually receive a false news that they have cancer, and then in the further test to say, okay, actually you don't have cancer, rather than to go the other way, where actually a person has cancer, but in the screening test they are said, okay, you don't have cancer, so that they don't actually go for the further diagnosis. So these are some of the responsible things that you should do when you're designing an AI or designing a solution, or these are the metrics that you need to keep in mind when you're designing a solution in the medical domain. Apart from this, in general, with AI, you would have to also account for socio-economic and also environmental factors, right? So the first one is, does it replace jobs? Does your AI solution have negative impact on the society? Right. So it should not be in a way that it completely destroys people's lives and livelihoods just because you want to make more capital gain, or for yourself or even for a company. As Dr. Ambika mentioned, like Alexa is straight up ruining, okay, it just got triggered over here. So Alexa is basically ruining our brains. It's just, we are basically trying to bootload Amazon's own AI by feeding data to it constantly. Amazon doesn't have any incentive to cut back on it or to make it more responsible or to even improve human lives. It's making its money, so it's doing its job and it's okay. So there has to be stricter government guidelines to ensure that data is used in a responsible way, or the AI has a positive behavioral and social impact. One of the things that I'd really like to mention is that imagine, so there is this one established fact, which has been a hypothesis from ancient Greece, which has been proven now through statistics, that crimes occur in poverty-ridden areas. So when there is more poverty, then there are more crimes. So this is the association that you have. So let's say you train an AI where you give the input, which is basically the amount of money that a person makes, to say whether that person is more likely to commit a crime or not. That might be some sort of a statistical output, but in some sort of a, especially in criminal proceedings, that actually gives a lot of disadvantage to a person who actually earns less. So that person can be falsifyingly convicted of a crime that that person did not commit. It could also be when it comes to gender. So there was this AI which was given, so it was just a character level NLP AI, which you would just read through the resumes character wise, and it would select whether that person is eligible for a job or not. There is sexism in industry. So there is not a lot of female CEOs and female employees in higher power who take jobs, but that AI actually read through the character level, and it actually determined the sex of a person in the resume, and it would basically not give that person a job. So AI can be very smart, but also it can be very dumb because it doesn't actually understand everything. It just learns on the data that we give it to them. Assume that there is an AI which actually pumps up the net worth of a company by creating a lot of liquid waste. Of course, it's not a sustainable system. It's just giving a recommendation saying, hey, just use all of these chemicals, just pump up the production, and you'll have the net capital gain that you really want. But at the end of the day, that's not what you want. Because AI can actually probably consider how much capital gain there can be, but it doesn't actually consider the socio-economic factors. Fourth point is data responsibility is very important. In America, we have HIPAA, which is Health Information Private Accountability Act, I guess, which protects data of patients. So regularly, companies are audited, not only with respect to their finance, like their CAs do, but also when it comes to how they're collecting the data or how the data can be breached. What are the cybersecurity, measures that they have to make sure that there is no data breach, or how they're not actually invading a person's privacy or storing the actual values of the person's name. It could be their personal card information or social security number. So I think that these are the things that must be taken care of when the youngsters here who are in the audience member, if you are ever trying to start a new company, just bear in mind that these can actually have very negative implications in the society, and to take care of that is very important before you start any company or to even attempt to start a startup in this environment, I guess.
Thank you, Anil. I think it was very important that you brought in the challenges of class imbalance, and though people are trying to mitigate this issue, but it's so rampantly existing in our society, and like you said, the AI models are only as good as the data is. So I think this younger generation must take that into consideration, very cautiously design these systems. It's over now to Shashwat. I'd like to pick up a very interesting application which Anil mentioned about AI scanning through resumes. Okay, so I don't know, you must have had friends who called and were disappointed that they're not shortlisted by super dream companies. I hear that now the HR round screening is done by AI. And I also hear that, out of the 10 points that AI has identified as the most important, it has put CGPA as point number 9, and it has really turned the whole system upside down, favoring certain aspects and not favoring certain aspects, which are traditionally considered to be those associated with a perfect student, who can just walk into a super dream company. They're not even getting shortlisted these days. So what do you think? Do you think AI is disrupting the lives of students? They work their way, they work their profile in a particular style, but AI is throwing it away today. So do you think that, it's being responsibly used in, by HRs? You're on mute.
Yeah. So again, it's not only the lives of students that I think are being affected by AIs, which don't do the good work, but in fact it actually affects all of us, right? So like not only in this field, but I think that whenever you talk about AIs doing evil things, for most people, an image will come out of mind, like for Skynet, like conquering the entire world or like killing people. The thing is, AIs are developed by humans. They know how to learn, but AIs don't know how to think, right? So that kind of an expectation from any AI would be kind of useless, at least for this time period. So the way I see it, AI and ML and all the emerging technologies, in fact, the usage actually depends on whoever is using it. It's in the hands of the user. It's the same with internet. It's the same with cybersecurity. It's the same with mobile phones and communications. A lot of people have used it for good and a lot of people have used it for bad. The only thing we can take for sure is, for example, it's a cybersecurity, right? There are a lot of penetration testers and ethical hackers that always try to, do good. But the usage of that technology is only, we can only see it with, black hat hackers or whatever. They always find a way in because of how they choose to use the technology, right? So even in the case of AIs, what we can say is it depends on how we use it, and we just have to count on the fact that there are more good people in the world than bad. So, like as an example, I would like to say something, right? So, I was talking about breaking captchas. Specifically, there's a form of captcha called reCAPTCHA, which a lot of industries like a lot of companies like Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, these all use. So currently, it's the most secure of captchas, and it has a 46% or 47% success rate with the latest AIs. So the reason it's so hard to break is it because it does not use conventional characters and letters from the English alphabet? No. What they use is images from real places. For example, if you have an address, right? You have a nameplate outside your door, right? Suppose my name is Shashit Panda, so I'll have a nameplate outside my door called Panda Family, right? So what Google does is it uses images like these from all around the world using Google Earth or Google Maps, and it takes these little pieces of text or information and uses that for captcha. So it's really impossible to break it, because obviously there are so many fonts and styles of writing around the world, and that too in real location where you can't actually segregate the text from the background. In those cases, things like GANs are really, really useful, because GANs generate a lot of data from a lot of old data. So off the top of my head, you could probably make an AI that can use a GAN, and it could use those things to train captchas. Like it can make, like I was telling you, right? Making new data, making new real world captchas from the data sets of old captchas. You can do that with GANs, and even a CNN would do that. So if you're determined enough, you will always find a way to break the system. And like AI is even more revolutionary a technique than cybersecurity even, or if you hack ethically with Kali Linux, that's nothing. With artificial intelligence, there's like a million ways to break something. There's 10 off the top of my mind right now that you can do to actually break something. But that's the thing, right? Defending against these attacks or some bad use of any kind of cutting edge technology is a reactive process. It's not an active process, right? For doing something bad, it would have to be an action. But in order to defend against them, or try to keep those at a bare minimum, you have to react to those attacks or whatever bad usage there is, and you have to react to it very fast, so the damage is always minimized. Or you can think like a bad guy and try to do those attacks and report the bugs and functionality changes. So that's the way I see it. Like, we just have to prepare for them, because there are going to be some bad usages of AI as we go on through the next 2-3 decades.
Thank you, Shashwat. I think transfer learning is something that a lot of people are exploring: one-shot learning, few-shot learning, and all these things. Again, like what you said, who uses it, how you use it, and when you use it. All these are what actually makes AI responsible, not only the technology, but also the data. At this point, I would like to thank one of our panelists has to leave right now. I think the rest of us are here and we'd like to interact with the audience at this point. But Vinay, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing your valuable thoughts, and I'm sure it was a great takeaway for the students here. And I'm sure you should continue to do joint research with the student community. They never let you grow. They keep you young and bubbly all the time. So stay connected with the college students. I think today with this online thing, you can really connect with students even across India. You can reach out through these kind of platforms. I think you should connect with our students. If we have some opportunity, we can connect over a session with you as well from VIT. Thank you, Vinay. I'll get it done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to this. It was a great conversation. And I completely agree with you. I absolutely love interacting with students because they bring a very fresh perspective to problem sets that we sometimes tend to miss. So I definitely intend to keep interacting. And thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much, sir.
Panelists. Right.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here.
Saharsh,
my pleasure.
Ma'am, if our other panelists are okay, we can still extend it and take some questions from all.
Okay. So now it's open. If any students would like to ask questions, it'd be nice if you can, unmute your camera so we can see you. But if you're not comfortable doing that, it's fine. We can ask your question. You can still ask your question.
If I may, sorry to interrupt your conversation. So just one word on a light note, when you asked Shashwat, so how would your lives be gone when we have an automated HR route? I was expecting that Shashwat would say, I would come up with a solution which will help me automate my resume.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. Yeah. I might start working on it. But yeah, that actually can be done. But the thing is, you'll have to, for that, you actually need a really big data set, right? Of all the resumes that students have been putting out or uploading, right? So with those resumes, you could possibly create a pattern if you already know the outcome, if it was rejected or accepted by the HR. So just like the VITrendz is getting trained in the companies for shortlisting us, the students, we could actually make some kind of an AI that could use our own resumes as a data set and the information if they were accepted or not. And we could train a model so that we can just encourage the positive points of the resume. For example, if they look at my experience and they say that it's only less than 2 years or 3 years, or if my topic is something that that affects the AI's inputs, then obviously all those parameters would get changed slowly and gradually.
So probably there should be an AI system which will recommend what you should do over 4 years so that your resume will be accepted by an AI. So again, you can use the AI to build your resume with a recommender system. Anyway, it's only you guys can counter such an algorithm, like nobody can, So I know students who are reverse engineering, trying to understand, from whatever data they collect from, they gather information orally and they're trying to guess how the algorithm is probably.
So on that note, I just have a small comment. There is already a platform called VMock, and a lot of these big universities, MITs or Cambridge, they use this platform to shortlist based on the resume, and this platform is able to provide a percentage just based on the data that is provided in the resume. So yeah, these are the solutions that people try to come up with. So yeah, that you're absolutely right. Like when Dr. Ambika said, I really like that point that there is some problems in these solutions, but you need to also think of getting some solution, like getting a solution to it. So that's how development occurs.
Yeah. Thank you, Suhas, for adding to that point. Any audience, there questions in the chat box? So there is one question: is the use of AI in organizations like DRDO considered disruptive or helpful? It's in the chat box. Would anybody like to take that question? Is the use of AI in organizations like DRDO considered disruptive or helpful? Any of the panelists? Use of AI by the defense. Basically, AI for destruction, defense. You know, how do you?
I don't have a lot of. Sorry, Dr. Ambika, would you like to continue?
No, that's okay, Anil. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I have never worked with the DRDO, of course, but one of my final year engineering projects was actually concerning application of AI in defense. So I wanted to make sure I think I had just seen a movie where I saw a lot of soldiers getting killed, and I was like, okay, this has to change. So what if we send machines instead, and machines can fight, and who has the best machines wins instead of bloodshed. So I wanted to come up with an AI which would have some sort of a reinforcement learning system, which would not know how to walk on its own, but actually learns as it goes. So it can actually learn to grow around complex terrains and stuff like that. So there are some uses. So it's not a binary situation. So yeah, AI also helps saves lives. So you don't have to risk soldiers. You can probably send AI robots which can actually go there and which can fight. But then again, a human will still have a little bit of awareness and respect for his or her own life. But an AI can be completely reckless. It can literally do suicide attacks times a million maybe. So it's not a binary situation at all. And one other problem that we have is, AI is already used in defense. For example, auto-navigated drone strikes. It could be also unguided missiles. It can just it can track the target and it can just go and hit. Nowadays, AI is very tempting. It's very tempting to use AI for defense, in that it can be used for bioweapons or bioterrorism, right? So while there are some advantages to it, there are also disadvantages pertaining to that. But Dr. Ambika, if you would like to, yeah.
Yeah, I was just getting to a point where, is AI the one which is causing a disruptive defense? I don't think so, right? Then before AI was there, we had terrorists. We have our COVID without AI's interference, right? But I think we should use AI as a defensive purpose to protect ourselves. So there's nothing like a regulation. It's a regulation again. Now the government of India has released this missile which can directly hit a particular location when it can be set, right? And there's nothing wrong about it. It's about how you're going to use it, when you're going to use it. And that is completely dependent on the mind. And it's not actually AI which is taking this decision. It's a human which is taking this decision. So using AI in defense is definitely not wrong. But when you're going to use, which is decided by the human, is where we should have some policy or the regulation.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. There's one more question. Rahul Kripa wants to know if doing higher studies in the field of AI, is it like, because AI is, becoming a fundamental skill, like we're trying to make sure that everybody learns AI. It's there even now in the schools from 9th standard onwards, at least in Indian curriculum. So at this point, doing higher studies in the field of AI, investing a whole PG course, is this a good suggestion? And also the question is about whether it should be a thesis track or a non-thesis track, the pros and cons of each. I think if you can talk about, I don't know if Anil will be able to highlight if, specialized PG course in AI, will it really help? And because, the models, like how Shastri was talking about, today there's GANs, today there's something else, it's changing so much. So you invest time in a degree, you learn a whole lot of models, and then, it's a totally different scenario when you graduate. So, is it important to learn how to learn this, or is it important to learn it?
So I basically think that, okay, first of all, full disclosure, I'm not doing my master's in AI, I'm doing it in statistics, but I do definitely deal with a lot of people who are doing their master's in AI. It could be ML, that would be the side track, or data science. So whether whether it's a good option to do higher studies in the field of AI, it really depends whether you want to be in academia, whether you want to get into research, whether you want to use GANs, or whether you want to come up with something like GANs. So that's the question that you need to ask yourself. So if you want to come up with something on your own, if you want to come up with a new technology rather than to learn how to use it or to get into careers where you would use it, I would say that, if you want to come up with your own technology, you should go with a thesis track. And of course, it would involve a lot of theory. It would involve a lot of mathematics. It would be probably from some stochastic processes or some sort of a statistical computations in Monte Carlo, background. But if you want to just use it, you can just get into ML course, PG course without a thesis, and maybe once you're through with it, you will definitely learn the tools which are necessary and like the techniques that will set you on a good professional track. At least I think so.
I think we're done with the questions in the chat box. I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions. Maybe you can just give your closing remarks, Suyash, and we can wrap up.
Yeah. So yeah, I just have to hop on to another meeting in 15 minutes. So it was really nice interacting with all of you, and I really learned a lot from you all. And yeah, thank you for this invite, and happy to connect with anyone, outside of this.
Thank you very much. So, ma'am, may I take it?
Yeah, sure. You can go on.
Thank you. So, what a profound panel discussion. And after today's session, I'm completely filled with knowledge and newer insights and ideas. So a lot of gratitude towards our panelists and our awesome moderator, ma'am, for making it for today's panel discussion. Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you to all the panelists. This was such a powerful discussion, and I'm so sure that all the audiences would have received one lifetime experience that could help them to build lots of insights, ideas, and have a problem-solving attitude ahead using AI. So this event wouldn't have been possible without the wonderful cooperation and support from our esteemed moderator for today, Dr. Susan Elias. And I will request our team panel to kindly share the screen and please present the memento of gratitude to our moderator for today's panel discussion, Dr. Susan. Thank you, Ajit. Thank you very much, ma'am, for graciously accepting our invitation and also accepting the role of moderator for this panel discussion. After seeing you, ma'am, today in the role, I cannot even think of anyone else performing this role, and it was so magical. So please accept our token of gratitude, ma'am, and thank you very much.
Thank you. This is the most wonderful certificate I've ever received. It looks really decorated. Thank you. It's very well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Panel discussion is not a panel discussion without the panelists. And my gratitude showers toward our panelists starting from Dr. Ambika DR. Thank you very much, ma'am, for taking out time out of your busy schedule and sharing your wisdom with all of us. Please accept our token of gratitude, ma'am. Achyut, if you can please present Dr. Ambika. I will move in the interest of time to Mr. Suyash Bhatt, joining us from UK, Cambridge, sharing his experience and insights with us. Thank you, sir, thank you very much, sir, for accepting. We are extremely thankful to have you on board with us as a part of our 8-day National Summit. And it was so exciting to hear about the Western countries' perspective towards AI applications. So please accept our certificate of gratitude, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I'm graciously asking Mr. Vinay Rao to accept our token of gratitude and appreciation for sir's time, for sharing his insights and knowledge with us. In spite of his traveling and having a very packed schedule, sir reschedule his schedule and make time for this panel discussion. Thank you very much, sir, for doing that for us. Our next panelist, and I loved hearing from him and his ideas and opinions and the knowledge about statistics and mathematics. Mr. Anil, having his own event at the College of Michigan, took out time for us and shared his deep insights on the various applications, ethics, and ideas on upcoming AI developments and data collections. So thank you very much, sir. Please accept our gratitude for your contribution. Thank you, Mr. Anil, for being
Thank you
here.
so much. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, my deepest pleasure to thank Shashwat Panda for being here as a panelist and representing the whole student and the learners fraternity. Thank you, Shashwat, for being accepting our invitation and gracing us with the great insights about various newer technologies, GANs, and those applications based insights. So thank you, Shashwat, for being here.
Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
Our thanks extend to our wonderful media partners for the event, VITrendz, innovation partners, Microsoft Innovation Club, space research partners, SEDS Antariksh, education partners, EduChecked, fellow coordinators from IEEE BMSCE, and finally, our major host for this National Summit team, Checked. I would like to extend my thanks to all the learners and AI enthusiasts who were attending today's panel discussion. Thank you, folks. The feedback form link will be there in the chat box. Before leaving, kindly help us to improve ourselves and help us to bring better and more insightful sessions for you in the future. Make sure you're filling up the feedback form. Today's challenge is an AI crossword, something very similar to the newspaper crossword, but it is digitalized form. Make sure you are attending that AI crossword and having some fun time and a brainstorming time with yourselves. All the best with that. Stay tuned for our upcoming sessions. Tomorrow, we have two wonderful sessions from two great speakers, 4 to 5, a non-technical session, followed by a short guided meditation by Ms. Jyoti. She is a Vice President HR in one of the biggest multinational firms, which will be followed up by a very important and insightful session on federated learning by none other than our Susan ma'am from 6 to 7. So make sure that you are not missing out on them. And thank you very much to all the panelists, to all the attendees and everyone who was behind these sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am, Susan ma'am, Suyash sir, Anil sir, Dr. Ambika, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, wonderful audience, for being here so patiently. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all once again. Thank you all panelists. And we will stay connected over, I think I'd like to connect with all of you, and I think I've taken your mail IDs. I will connect with all of you. Thank you.
And we will be connected for future endeavors as well, Mr. Suyash, Anil, ma'am. So, and Shashwat is our own part. So he will be there with us in the journey. So thank you very much. And a happy Gandhi Jayanti to everyone here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Suyash sir, for making it out. Thank you, Anil sir. Thank you. And Shashwat, you were on fire. So awesome. It was an awesome hearing from you. Thank you, Shashwat. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. We'll still keep the meetings here on so that everyone can take up the links from the chat box. Feedback for day 6 is out, and also the crossword challenge is out. Make sure you're filling, and the first one will be winning the prizes. So yeah. Ajit, is these links have been pasted in the YouTube live as well?
Yeah.
Okay, great. We can still wait for 5 more minutes, Ajit, and then we'll end it. Thank you, audience, for being so wonderfully here.
Saharsh, you are mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. And it was great to see you today. Make sure you are joining us for tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we have a vice president of one of the biggest firm at a multinational company. And she will be joining us with a non-technical session on prioritizing your well-being. It will be followed up with a guided meditation round for 10 minutes. So you will feel much lighter and you will be ready for the next session by Dr. Susan on federated learning, and how that is the something which is very, very booming and a coming up field for the next era coming up in the AI. And this is how every company and everyone will be running towards. So make sure you are tagged in and you are learning something new. The first session timing are 4 to 5, Varshini, and the second session timings are 6 to 7. So you will have a 1 hour break between. But trust me, these insights and these thoughts are going to help you throughout, because, and you will be able to ask a lot of questions and your queries from the Vice President HR, who will be joining us, Ms. Jyoti, and Susan ma'am as well. So from 6 to 7, 4 to 5 and 6 to 7. Every other details are there on our website. The Zoom link for joining will be the same. So you can again join the same Zoom link for tomorrow from 4 to 5 and from 6 to 7. Make sure you are there and bringing your friends along, so that it's having a collaborative learning and everybody's learning at the same point of time. So, any advice anybody would like to give from the attendees who are staying here with us till now? If they have any feedback, any advice they want, they can unmute themselves. Achyut, is it okay if I turn off the YouTube live?
Yeah.
Okay, otherwise in 2 minutes we'll end it. If people over there are seeing it, let them fill the forms. Please share it again, Achyut.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. And make sure the forms are not being circulated in the groups, neither privately to anyone. If you are attending the session completely, and in the end, you will be receiving the feedback form. Thank you. Any feedback, any advice from the attendees? I hope everybody have filled the feedback form and are ready for the crossword. Just for crossword challenge, we can still put it up in the WhatsApp groups and other informal communities. And for feedback form, it will not be circulated anywhere.
I think.
So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
And the results for the.
Yeah, and the results for last day, day 5 winners will be announced on our social media pages. So tag in there.
And even for the Microsoft EduNotion challenge, it will be announced today.
Okay, so for Microsoft EduNotion challenge, it will be announced today on the social media pages only. So make sure you are connected with us over EduChecked or EduChecked social medias. We are there on every platform, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and also live on YouTube. So everywhere it will be announced. Make sure you are there when following us. Thank you very much, Achyut. I guess we can end the session.